Happy Monday, 8:05. Great to be here on KCMO Talk Radio. Hope you had an outstanding weekend where it wasn't 105 degrees. So over the weekend, I'm reading this in the Wall Street Journal, headline, Why Tribalism Took Over Politics. And they've got two charts here that shows Republicans and Democrats and how those in each party view the other party. And what percentage of Republicans and Democrats view the other side very unfavorably. And the numbers have spiked tremendously the last few years. You go back to 1994, and 21% of Republicans viewed Democrats very unfavorably. At the time, 17% of Democrats viewed Republicans very unfavorably. So the number was about 1 in 5 in each party of people who viewed the other side very unfavorably. That number has climbed tremendously the last nearly 30 years. Right now, 54% of Democrats view Republicans very unfavorably, and 62% of Republicans view Democrats very unfavorably. Why is that? Well, people are going to want to point to media. They're going to want to point to maybe even talk radio, YouTube, whatever, podcasting. That's just not true, though. I mean, talk radio was alive and well 30 years ago, right? And certainly wasn't the case. So you can't, and cable news was around, certainly starting around this time, and it wasn't the case. But when you look at the graphics, and I'll put them up on social media, you can see them on our KCMO Talk Radio Facebook page. We'll have that up next break, and I'll put it up on Twitter as well. The spike really started around 2010. That's when it happened for both parties. You started to see a major spike in tribalism in politics right around 2010. Now, I'm not going to make it political and say, oh, well, obviously it's Barack Obama's fault. No, I mean, he certainly didn't help the cause. Barack Obama could have been right up there with Washington and Lincoln as one of the all-time great presidents. I mean, he really could have been that guy. He chose not to be. He chose to be a divider, and, that brought us in many ways Donald Trump. Trump is not president unless Obama handles his business the way he did. So, but it's not Obama's fault when you look at the tribalism in this country. I'm not going to put it at his feet. He didn't help, but it's not his fault. The thing I keep coming back to is social media. When you look at the spike on these charts from 2010 to now, the numbers have almost doubled. They went up steadily from 94 to 2010, but from 2010 to today, they have skyrocketed. Of Democrats viewing Republicans unfavorably and Republicans viewing Democrats unfavorably. And I'm looking at this chart, and I'm just saying to myself, okay, you may want to try to draw political conclusions out of this, but that doesn't seem reasonable. What changed in our culture? What changed societally over the last 15 years? Well, we don't talk like human beings anymore, number one. We just sit there and we yell at each other on Facebook. And people say things on social media they would never say to anybody in person. They wouldn't. There are things, just admit it, there are things that you will either post on social media to people or just on your own that you would never say to somebody's face. Trust me, I experience it on a very small level all the time. Even people who disagree with me, if you bump into them, they're never like they are on social media. Never. But for some reason, we get behind the keyboard and we start, banging away, and we're tough guys. We're tough gals. And then if you consume the media you want to consume in conjunction with the social media bubbles that we live in today and having fewer and fewer real human interactions, and you create this world where those who do not think exactly like you are the enemy. Heck, it happens within our own political parties, right? On both sides of the political aisle. If you do not view somebody as pure as you, if they don't agree with you on every single issue, you label them whatever, rhino, sellout, fill in the blank. whatever you want to do. If they are not as pure as you perceive yourself to be, they're the enemy. And nothing about that is how the real world works. Nothing about that is how politics works. Heck, that's not the case in your family life, right? You and your spouse don't agree on everything. How boring of a life would that be, by the way? You don't marry somebody. You don't choose to spend the rest of your life sleeping in the same bed as somebody who agrees with you 100% of the time. But for some reason, we've gotten to this stupid place in politics where it's like, you know what? If you're not 10 out of 10 on my side, oh boy, you got to be skeptical of that guy or gal. I don't know about them. Geez, they can't trust them as far as I could throw them. You know, they're pretty good on some stuff, but man, I don't know on this one issue. Whew, boy, I don't like where they're going with that. It's so dumb. And in the end, we're losing because of it. As a culture, as a country, societally speaking, we're all losing. And that's where social media has brought a lot of great things to the conversation. We've reconnected with people we haven't seen in years. You keep up with people. You don't have to go to your high school reunion anymore because you can see who got fat on Facebook. There's a lot of great things that's come out of it. But man, when it comes to our political discourse, it has destroyed us. Social media, there's no other answer to me outside of social media. It has destroyed us. 913-408-7710 is how you join us on KCMO Talk Radio.
If only so many of us were as virtuous in real life as we think we are and appear to be on social media, it might be a better place.
Well, you know? Yes.
Usually it's this false morality thing about how dare you.
Absolutely. That's a big part of it. On the text line, but Pete, marriage is not political. No, I understand that. But you can laugh at that too.
Said the person who's never been married.
Yeah. That's true. But I see what you're saying there. Like, marriage is not politics. Yeah. I get what the texter is trying to point out. But at the same time, why would you look for a politician who is completely pure? Because, by the way, the person who is completely pure, I've got questions about, because nobody is completely pure, by the way. There's only been one pure person in the history of mankind, and it wasn't a politician. It wasn't Trump. It wasn't Biden. It wasn't Reagan. It wasn't Clinton. It wasn't any of them. 913-408-7710, 8:13 on a Monday morning. I've got to bring you into the conversation because when I saw this story from the Wall Street Journal, tribalism overtaking politics, and the numbers have tripled from less than 30 years ago on the number of Republicans who have a very unfavorable view of Democrats and the number of Democrats who have a very unfavorable view of Republicans. How did we get here? To me, the answer is obviously social media, but I'm open to other possibilities as well. 913-408-7710. We'll keep this conversation going with you. Bottom of the hour, Missouri Attorney General. I almost said Jay Ashcroft, but of course he's Secretary of State. So Andrew Bailey's going to be here at 8:35 on KCMO. How did we get here? 30 years of data put together by the Wall Street Journal over the weekend suggests that Republicans now on a 62% margin view Democrats very unfavorably. That's triple the number from 1994 when it was just 21%. And on the Democratic side, now 54% of them view Republicans very unfavorably. That number was 17% back in 1994. Got some good stuff on the text line here, 913-408-7710.
That was indicating Republicans viewed Democrats more unfavorably in both measurements, right?
Correct.
Right, so that kind of stayed the same, apparently, although the Democrats may have caught up in a percentage-wise.
Yes, but Republicans have, by a little bit more, viewed Democrats very unfavorably at a higher rate than Democrats viewed Republicans very unfavorably. Correct. So the text line's very good on this. I think it's all social media driven. There's just no doubt in my mind. You can't say it's corporate media. You can't say it's talk radio. It's none of that. because that stuff was around in the mid-'90s. I mean, O'Reilly, Fox News just getting going, obviously. Now it built up over the years. But when you look at this graph, it spikes around 2010. That coincides perfectly with when social media started taking over the discourse in this country. On the text line, Pete, I think division comes from the glue that held America together. God, freedom, patriotism. Well, yes, that is true. People are finding, by the way, false gods in politicians. That is absolutely true. As people move away from God in this country, they replace that. Something's always going to replace that in your life. What's it going to be? For too many, by the way, I will say on the right and the left, it's not unique to the left. It's happening on the right too. They're replacing God with false gods. And they're looking to politicians, specific people to do that, to fill that gap. There's nothing healthy about that. Also on the text line, 2490. Pete, you're right. Not only can people not disagree in a decent manner, if they don't agree, they'll try to cancel that thing or that person. They'll go as far to send things to your employer in attempts to get them involved. Trust me, I know all about that firsthand. It can't be like, hey, I don't like Pete's show, I'm not going to listen. I'm going to try to actively get Pete fired if I can because I don't like what he says on his show. Yeah, we have come a long way on that front, and that's been obviously happening a lot, even more so as of late, sad to say. So that's absolutely true. 913-408-7710. Let's go to the phones. Jonathan is in Kansas City. Hey, Jonathan, good morning.
How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. What's happening?
So I look at America, I basically break it into three stages. The first is the beginning of the country till about 2000. And when we had that, we've always had a two-party system, but each party recognized, okay, when the other wins, we accept the result, and we move on, and we try again in 4 years, and that's just the way it is. And we all come together and call that our president. 2000 kind of broke that. That's what started, you know what, I'm just not going to accept the election. I'm not going to accept the other party. It's not my president. I'm going to start openly, just being more rebellious. And then I think what really, so I think it started from a healthy country to a country that early stage cancer, I'll call it. I think 2012, and Ben Shapiro kind of posits this theory too. 2012 is what really broke the country, where basically Mitt Romney, the nicest politician ever, they said, oh, you're going to put you all back in chains. And it was after that, Republicans are like, you know what, we're sick of it. We're going to stop listening to late night. We're going to get our own media, and we're going to nominate Trump to be president, and we're just going to completely destroy the country. And so I think 2012 and after, I think we're basically in end-stage cancer. And the problem with it is, end-stage, there's no cure. And I'm not sure there's a cure for all this. That's what I'm really worried about.
Jonathan, that's a great call. And points are all well taken. And I have the same concerns that you do. And you're right, by the way. I mean, since 2000, you have had more people challenging the legitimacy of elections. Everyone talks about 2020, and obviously 2020 was a culmination of many things. But don't forget, I mean, like Maxine Waters was actively trying to overturn 2016. Yes, of course, we know about, 2000, Florida, Gore Bush. And that continued from there on out, and it culminated in what happened a couple of years ago. And you are right. I think that 2012, in many ways, did break us because of how Mitt Romney was treated by the media, how he was treated by the Joe Bidens, the Barack Obamas of the world, put you all back in chains, famous Joe Biden line. And then Republicans said, you know what, if you're going to treat a guy like Mitt Romney this way, then we're going to try to burn the whole thing down with Trump. Doesn't make it right, but understandably, that was the approach. There is no Donald Trump without Barack Obama. I said that earlier, and I firmly stand by it, because that was a guy who had all the potential in the world to be one of the all-time great presidents, even as a Democrat. Unifying, signaling this country's moving in the right direction, the whole thing. He could have been that guy. And by the way, he campaigned as that guy. And then Obamacare happens, Republicans take the House in 2010, and then 2012, he just tries to basically go all full-blown negative. You don't reelect me, the country's going to hell in a handbasket, drummed up race relations, made them worse than they already were, and the thing's been downhill ever since in large part. Alfonso's in Blue Springs. What's up, Alfonso? You're on KCMO.
I think the biggest change since 2010, I think you're right with social media, but also we've lost the middle of each party. There's really no moderates on either side anymore. And that really kept us kind of toward the middle. Now it's just left and right. There's no middle ground anymore.
You're right. And here's the other thing, Alfonso, I will add. And this was noted in the Wall Street Journal article. Americans in the past were more likely to meet people different from themselves, which created opportunities for reducing group bias and creating conditions for compromise. But as red areas get redder and blue areas get bluer, and social media creates a bubble where you can choose to interact with people based on whatever formula you want in your algorithm, that breaks away any idea of compromise, and it breaks away any idea that you're going to have a moderate part of either party. And then the primary process is a whole nother beast that has completely screwed itself up. So that is a very good point as well. People are less likely to even interact with those who don't see the world as they do. And they don't have to. That's the other thing. In a world that's so technology-driven now, you don't have to. You can choose to not interact with people who you don't want to simply based on political beliefs. And is that healthy for a culture and a country? I don't think it is. And I don't see how this fixes itself anytime soon. To Jonathan's earlier point, I don't know who that person is. Everyone's like, the boomers always say, we just need that Reagan. It's not that simple. Trust me, it is not that simple.